Okay, we're back with our final episode or chapter of reviewing AI, the Somnium Files, Nirvana Initiative. Last week, the story had come to an end, and we were doing some housekeeping items. We found out that Ryuki is still alive, and then we get told the nil number by Tokiko, a hologram of Tokiko, correct?
That's right. Right.
And yeah, so you're playing as Ryuki when that happens, right? No, you're
It,
Mizuki's.
it's the Mizukis,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
And she points this out later. So if you go back, enter the nil number, um, that's what she'll say. Like somehow she knows that it's to the Mizukis that she will reveal that information, 6 years in the future. Um,
Yes.
and then she says, this confirms, right, that you have been able to jump through time and space. And somehow that's related to her attaining moksha, I think. I, I I'm not entirely clear what the Nirvana Initiative is, because it seemed like Terror thought it was to help all of humanity reach moksha, end the simulation, free everyone from the prison of their minds and bodies and what have you. But it seems like Tokiko really just wants to achieve moksha for herself. That was odd. Um, I don't know. How did you interpret that whole nil number side quest?
Yeah, so this isn't the first time that we've needed information from a different timeline to
Oh yeah,
progress in the game. But in
good
each of
point.
those instances, it was the player or the character who heard it is the one who needed that information. Or no, I guess is that
Mm,
true?
I
Yeah.
don't think so. I mean,
No,
it's
it is
it's
because like
Ryuki
yeah,
who gets the Dahlia
and boat.
and boat, but then it's Mizuki who needs that information.
But I think at that point you're actually playing as Ryuki. You're
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah,
Is it that early?
I think you
Oh,
are.
it is that early. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I think it's in that very first one. So I think I'll have to go back and double check. Um, but I'm pretty sure that this was the only time where it transcended the character in the game. Right? It's the first,
Gotcha.
and so if I'm correct, well, I think we should go back first. My understanding is the nil number is different for each game.
Hmm.
So
Maybe mine was like a 4501503, I want to say.
I don't know
Could
what mine
be
is,
mixing them up. Okay.
but I think that's the case, which is kind of interesting how they generate that and how you can't put that code in before you. If that's true, then you can't beat it. You cannot put in the code before you beat the game. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so so I think that's interesting because all the other information that you need, like you could put it in early.
Oh, so what would happen if you started a new game and you did Dahlia Boat without having gone down that timeline?
You know,
Does
that's a
the
good
game like
question.
register that in some way?
You know what? Maybe we'll have to have another follow up, another
Oh
episode
no.
next week where I explore this. Um,
Oh no.
but yeah, so I thought that was that. So that's interesting, right? And so after you give the nil number, um, you know, Tokiko's pointing out obviously like you've transcended this logical paradox. Like how do you know it, Ryuki, when I told the two Mizukis
Mhm.
and all this stuff, uh, and the whole world kind of glitches out, right?
It's the same way that Ryuki has been having these freakouts though.
Yes,
It's maybe just a little more so. But this is another thing that's never really explained, I think.
yes,
Like what's going on in Ryuki's mind slash it seems to put Aiba offline as well, or rather Tama goes offline during those freakouts, sometimes anyway. So yeah, what's that about? Is that like simulation breaking down? Is that what we're supposed to be getting from that?
uh, That's a good from you mean from the other times where it's kind of been like a glitchy mess?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. That's actually one of the questions that I kind of had.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure if because I'm pretty sure some of the stuff, some of your episodes happen before you're even like infected with uh, the TC purge, right?
Mhm, mhm. I
But
think so.
yeah, so but this one's unlike all the other ones in that we can walk around the room. I think the
Yes.
guard is doing a T pose.
Yeah, that was really creepy because his face is, like, missing,
Yeah.
um, his body is frozen. He's kneeling, but his arms are spread out.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't like it too
Yeah. Well,
much.
and I don't know how knowledgeable you are, but that's like a very like common glitch that will happen in video games because that's just the like standard model that they start off with. And
Ah,
so
okay, I didn't
the
notice that.
yeah, so the T pose, and it goes back to what Tokiko was saying originally, where I mean she talks about like a video game and you breaking the boundaries, and um, that she compares achieving moksha to like the debuggers in a video game who just
Mhm.
screw around long enough with like certain mechanics until they tear at the seams.
That's very interesting, yeah, and that makes more sense along the lines of their, like, videos that are put out there for the whole world to mess around with, like, and to figure out. Like, that seems like a thing that requires a lot of people to accomplish. Like, an individual could do it, but it's so much more efficient to have, like, many people working on that at once and then sharing what they discover with each other. I feel like that pushes forward, like, speed running and stuff like that, so much more quickly.
Yes, yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't thought about that. Um, but yeah, so where where it's glitched out. The guard is doing his weird T pose, and then you realize that all the boundaries have broken, right? And you go and you walk over and you see Tokiko. She has this weird like red aura behind her. Um,
Yeah.
and then it's just like a whole like exposition dump, like you know. I don't know whatever her end goal was, but yeah, I think you're right. I think she's the only one who achieves moksha.
Seems that way. And she offers you the choice, right, to either remember everything, and, um, you know, solve the basically solve the case, or you can forget everything, and it'll be like, "This never happened," right? She'll just have disappeared. Um, so I chose to remember everything, and this leads
Yes.
to, like, a few more little scenes. It's awesome because it creates this, like, completely sideways timeline that jumps off one side of the screen and comes back in way down at the bottom of the other side of the screen on the
Yeah.
flowchart.
Yep.
I thought that was hilarious. It's like the old, arcade games and stuff where you go off one side and pop back in the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Like screen rolling or screen wrapping. That's
Yes.
yeah. And it's a glitchy mess. And it's depicted that way on the timeline as you're like going through it and picking it. Um, yeah, I picked to obviously remember everything. I think if
Mhm.
you didn't, uh, the game would be over. I would assume. So to keep the game
I
going on,
guess.
I decided remembering. And yeah, so we go to the park and then we just start. Everyone starts showing up, right? Uh,
Right.
Andes comes and basically he hasn't been killed. Well, I think first we talk to Date, right? And it's like Date's like, "Are you okay? Like you solved the HBK 6 years ago, and now you're sitting behind a desk all the time, and you have a boring life, and blah 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 blah."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because even Ryuki's like confused as to like what's happened in the past.
Yeah. Right. It's almost like he's just woken up from one of these episodes. It's just
Yes.
sort of like you phase into existence at this point in time and only gradually start to realize like what it means. It means like, yeah, nothing bad happened after solving the case. Terror is, behind bars. This does set up yet again like the possibility of a whole other spin-off episode type game in which, you know, all these characters are still around, including Terror. Um, and Tokiko, is off. hanging out with the creator, presumably, like outside of the boundaries of the game. But anyway, yeah. So you like lattes there, undies, shoma, uh, gen, and amame,
Hmm.
uh, kizuna, and lion, and they all, you know, are more or less like happy, I guess. But again, it does seem kind of boring this way. There's no game. It's like one scene.
Yeah,
That's all you get.
yeah, and so yeah, nothing bad happened. Andy's is like the only one who went to jail, and it was for because he was like disposing of the body in a weird way or whatever.
Right.
Terror was caught. A bunch of people didn't die. Um, and yeah, so Kizzy and Leanne, they're together. Kizzy can still walk. She doesn't need the wheelchair anymore. Um, and they even comment that this is like the perfect happy ending. Uh,
Mhm.
and you're right. It is boring. You solve the case and
It's
like it's over.
Yeah, and I mean, I think guess this is again part of what the developer seems to be getting at, right? Is like for all the weirdness of these games and like the ways in which they're scary or upsetting or whatever, they're really entertaining. Like you wouldn't want a game that was just everything turning out happily. I think that goes for pretty much every kind of story.
Yeah, you
Uh,
need
there's
some
just
kind of conflict.
there just has to be a terror in
Yeah,
there somewhere. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and maybe that's a thing about moksha that's like unsatisfying. I'm not sure. Like I guess I can't really wrap my mind about around what it would mean to completely cut loose of all desires and fears and emotions and everything.
Hmm.
But it might be basically saying like, well, that's not very interesting. It doesn't allow for any kind of storytelling at that point. So
Well, and the I guess the other thing is, and it goes back to whether Tokiko was just like achieved it or everyone
mhm,
else did, but uh, the world still seems like basically the same. I mean, the events
yeah,
changed, but it's still a simulation. Uh, right? So like that, when I was playing, I took it as like Tokiko knows that she like personally is in a video game, right?
yes,
She's leading all these events a certain way so that only she can escape it. Um, the resolution where you just decide, yeah, I'm going to solve the case early on. Um, that's more of the order of the percent type, like, oh, we live in a simulation and we can like change things.
yeah,
There was no like transcendence except for the fact that you had Mizuki's memory as Ryuki. But even then, she was talking to the Freyer, which I think it pretty obviously is supposed to be the player. Um, so yeah, no, it does. It seems very unsatisfying. The happy ending.
yeah.
Make
And there isn't really much to do beyond that. You can jump back into the timeline. You can replay things. I guess there's like some sort of bonus content that goes with, speaking of percents, right? If you 100% things and you find all the eyeballs and you do all the stuff in like a low time, I don't know. It seems like you can unlock maybe lots more things. Um, but there's also room for downloadable content, and I'm not sure what that is or if that's been released yet. What that would
I,
entail.
I think
But
you can buy Zero Escape themed like suits. So
huh,
they wear like Zero's mask, like
awesome.
top like Tama and Iba do.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, so there's that stuff. Obviously, you also can unlock the fifth cabin, which is the first room
Yes.
of 999, which, based on my recollection, is a very, if not identical, very close to the original game, except for you're playing as Iba instead of as Junpei.
Right. Right. And there is like a slight attempt to tie it in. She says something like, I don't know what happened. I was starting a sync and then I ended up here. Um, she doesn't seem to be in contact with either of her people, whether Yuki, Mizuki, Date, like nobody else is there except her.
Hmm.
So it's a little unsettling in that way. She's like alone.
Hmm.
Um, and then she also has like the memory of being kidnapped.
Yes.
That little like flashback that plays
Yes.
when you look in the mirror.
Yes.
So
Yeah. So so yeah, we have that, which I do have a question whether, and this is a weird question, but could the zero escape and these in this game all be in the same world? Because they seem very similar in terms of
mhm.
the technology that's available, uh, the jumping of consciousnesses and that kind of stuff. But I do want to go back and just say that at the end of the divergence, that's what the after you put the nil number, that's what
Oh
it's called.
yeah.
Um, there is you run into the two Mizukis,
Uh-huh.
and they have a
Oh yeah.
weird feeling like, hey, 6 years ago, like didn't we like stop the Nirvana Initiative? Like, what we both have this like weird feeling that we have this like connection with you,
Yeah.
and that it happened like today, and like they could not figure it out, like what was going on. So they ask you if you like remember anything.
That's right. And that's at the stadium, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's a little screen up on the big screen, right, of Tokiko again.
Hmm.
Doesn't she flash up there for a little bit?
Yes,
Um,
and
so yeah, yeah,
it's also worth mentioning that Tokiko like disappeared 6 years ago. You ask about when you're if you're when you're talking
yeah.
to someone, you're like, "Yeah, where's Tiko?" They're like, what are you talking about? She disappeared 6 years ago, and we've like no one's seen or heard from her again."
Mm.
So it does seem
And
like she's gone after you enter the nil number.
yeah, and so she, you know, exists in some way, like she can still phase back in through, TV screens or whatever. That that does seem to suggest that all these games could potentially exist in the same world, or at least like overlap with each other in some weird way. Um, few possibilities, like, you know, as Iba suggests, like previous games are existing in sort of the same way that syncs exist. The sync is not exactly a one-sided creation, right? It's like a thing that's happening in the person's mind that the mind of the syncer is also like participating in, obviously. Um, so that to me like sounds a lot like a game, basically, right? Like the developer makes it and then the player goes in and messes around with it in some way.
Yeah,
Um, so like, yeah, maybe these are all existing in the same way that the Somnium worlds exist. Temporarily, um, they're kind of subconscious, not exactly. Uh, there's that, or yeah, like they're all existing in the same way that the world of this game exists, like as simulations, like more rudimentary simulations that you can still revisit, but might not be entirely convincing anymore. I'm not sure. I don't know what this means in terms of like Shikoshi wanting people to go back and play previous games, or like if it's setting up with some kind of yes, like synthesis or like re-release down the line. I don't know. It's cool though. It does make you wonder like how all these things fit together. So it's a good question.
yeah. It is. I had a thought and I just lost it. What was I going to say? Hmm. Oh,
About somniums.
I forget. Uh,
Okay.
so did so I one of my questions was, didn't Terror like have Tama for a while? Like it was holding her hostage, right? Like I wonder,
Huh.
did they ever like, I guess, I don't know, change Tama in any way? Like that
Mm.
like basically, I don't know, like put something in there, or like rewrite her code, or to do his to do like Terror's bidding and that kind of stuff.
I remember uh, just that there was like a self-destruct thing in like, and I don't know if what it was supposed to just destroy Tama, or if it was supposed to also blow up, and destroy Ryuki in the same. Uh, I, yeah, I'm not sure how much of that would be uh
I guess my
like
question is, yeah, like did
influencing
they
him.
did
Yeah,
they hack Tama, right? Because I still don't
yeah, yeah.
understand why he passed out when he watched that video.
Gotcha. Okay, so
But
still
I
coming back to that, so that would be like an explanation for that possibly.
but I don't think it would be, because that was before Terror even got a hold of him. So I still don't really understand Ryuki and his episodes before he's infected.
Yeah. No, I don't know that we have enough to go on with Ryuki. Um, he seems like a little bit mentally unstable. That's
Yes.
partly, I guess that's partly to throw the player off the scent with everything too. Um, so yeah, I don't know why this particular kind of video should like trigger him to freak out quite so much.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember what I was going to say earlier when we were talking about like, video games and playing the Somniums. And I think, this game, not that I was aware of it until I started looking into the game and had beaten it, but it had the ARG game itself, when it was like teasing that this game was coming out, like in the real world.
oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
even Shoma mentions that the password was like the same as Bats 490. Anyway, the code and stuff. So I think even then we were like already kind of transcending video games. There's a
Mm.
scene between video games and these like real life ARGs that like people were participating in. So
Is there some kind of prize if you like cracked the code and went to the stadium? They
I,
have some
I
kind of giveaway?
I don't think so.
Ah, man.
But no, I think that just goes more to um, the interactivity and again the blurring of the lines between like what's real life and what's a video game and all this other stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I could imagine, I guess, you know, the marketing surrounding the game to an extent driving like the stuff that happens in the game. And that's the case, and it does also make me wonder about um, how the previous games would fit into that. Because as much as anything, they are responsible for these games existing at all, right? Like because those games were enough of a success, they were able to like keep going and making new ones. Um, so I wonder how much of this is like how much of it is going to the nostalgia of people who've already played those earlier games, and how much of it is kind of like the World's End Club, right? Like trying to get a new audience to get interested in these kinds of games and them to go back and play them.
I shudder to think of playing World's End Club again. Started off so well, and then it just went completely down the tubes. Um,
uh, true, true.
yeah. So, were you satisfied with the divergence?
Um, I think I was expecting a little bit more like I don't know, like tie-in maybe with like the rest of the game. Um, because to me it doesn't, and maybe that is like the thing with Ryuki's brain breaking, right? Like maybe that would have been the way to do it. Um, I don't remember too many other true like loose ends from the rest of the game. Other than, yeah, this big one, the big one of the Freyer, right? Like, how is it that we're able to jump back and forth in time and bring information back? Does seem like basically the explanation is, well, you're playing a game, right? And in the game world, you can make certain things happen because of the way the game has been put together for you, by the developer. The developer's having this great laugh at our expense, and we're having fun playing the game, and all's well and good. And then, yeah, for whatever reason, Yukiko wants to break out while everybody else wants to sort of stay there. Um, yeah, I don't really know. Like, I guess I would have wanted maybe just a little bit more in the way of, development of that idea of the Freyer. Um, like, what's really at stake, I guess, if there are timelines in which everyone's fine and then there's timelines in which everyone is not, like, does does either of those possibilities have more weight to it? Do either of them have any weight to them? Or, like, yeah, what would it mean to break out of the game, I guess?
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
I think the fact that you have the like option to choose what to do and to change like prior events, or I guess events going forward, after we were kind of like beaten over the head in Amame's like last Somnium about like you made the choice to do this, and it's like everything that you've done has led you to this, or like the choices that
Mm,
you made had have consequences, um, and they led you down this like you know road to where you are, and like you have to live with like the decisions that you make,
yeah,
and it makes I don't know, it kind of undermines like the whole game, right? Like
it does, yeah.
it's akin to like, hey, I woke up and it was all a dream, right? Like, oh, okay.
Yes, yes.
And I think they even say that at the end of the game, where it's like uh Ryuki or is like, oh, okay, this is like good, but like what, like I guess I'm happy that like this all happened and it's like the perfect happy ending.
Yeah, I think it would be an unsatisfying conclusion to the series. I'll say that. And I'm assuming and hoping that there will be more, if not within this, same universe, then just like with the same kinds of mechanics and questions and themes and things, right? Like, I'm assuming that this is an idea that is still being developed and queried on, played with, because yeah, I don't know that uh, it is ultimately all that satisfying the way it ends on this divergence path. Um,
Yeah, and it's you can look at the parallels of the first two games of like the Zero Escape series, right?
mm,
I feel like in each of them, the first game was like a much like almost like smaller world. It was like a more dark and like brooding, and it was more intense. Whereas like in the second game, it's just like over the top, like
yeah,
absurd
yeah,
for a lot of what's going on. And at the end
yeah,
of VLR, um, you're playing as basically the Freyer of that game, right? Um,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
playing as like Sigma. Yeah,
Sounds right.
yeah, you're like playing as him, but it's like you're you're supposed to be Sigma in that like instance. That was like a non-canon ending that confused everyone. But yeah, so I see a lot of parallels between the first two games of that series, which hopefully means we'll get a third to the AI
Mm,
series. Hopefully, it doesn't take as long as it did with Zero Time Dilemma, um,
yeah.
and hopefully, it resolves itself better than Zero Time Dilemma. But um, yeah,
Interesting.
there's still a lot of meat on the bone here, I think.
Oh, for sure. Uh, and I think the the way that the 999 opening, escape room thing is brought in suggests that there is some sort of synthesis that we could, well, I don't know. Maybe that's just a fun little thing to do, but maybe there will be some kind of attempt to bring together the world of those escape games and then the world of these kind of investigation style games. Um, I don't know how you can go bigger than Nirvana, but yeah, that
Well,
the
also,
theme is not totally resolved. So I don't know. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and what would be the killings be next time, right? You know, we had the
Right.
Cyclops killer, we have the half body. Like, how do you go up from there? Just the like obliteration. I like these people just like spontaneously combust.
Kind of, right? I
I'm not
could
real.
see it being some kind of like a mental breakdown, along the lines of Ryuki's, but like more so.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It remains to be seen. And yeah, how can you top the DNA crossing, conceit of the flowchart? It's
Yes.
pretty wild.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's going to be another game. Um, I did you get the opportunity to listen to people's like reviews of the game or their thoughts?
I mean, I have the opportunity, but I have not chosen to do so at
Okay,
this
yeah,
point.
yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it seems to me people like the first game um, more than the second one, and I wonder if part of that is because well, I've heard the one guy said like did a 20-minute video on why Divergence was like genius, and I was like, I don't really think this guy's
Mm,
arguments are really great, but
yeah,
um,
maybe trying too hard there.
yeah, I think so. Just like a little overzealous. But yeah, a lot of people seem to they're like, yeah, I would still recommend playing it, but the first one is definitely better.
Mm.
And I was just wondering what now that we finally completed it, we got the happy ending. Um, did
Hmm.
you have a preference for which game?
No, I mean, the first game is just more, I don't know, intense, I guess. Second game is more lighthearted. And I think that's more of a like preference thing than a thing where I could say like, oh, this one's definitively better than the other one.
Yeah,
But I'm never really one to wade into those kind of discussions in the first place. I just don't know that they're that productive. Um, so I try not to like say this thing is better than that thing or whatever. I just say like, this one was my favorite. Here are some of my reasons, but I'm not gonna like persuade you to like a
yeah,
thing.
no, yeah, no, I
Uh,
get that. Um, yeah, no, listen, I understand that. Just thinking. Um,
no, yeah, but personally, I enjoyed the second game more, but probably only because I had played the first game, right? Like I think there's something to be said for that too.
yes, I agree with that. Um, so I don't know. Do you have any like open items or questions that you have about this game that you're still like you just did not get a satisfactory answer to?
I don't know what to make of the experience of the game, like, or the completionist. Like trying to think of it from that person's point of view. Like go full order the percent here. I want 100% this game. I want to do everything that's possible to do. I mean, a very, very large amount of that seems to be playing, and doing basically what Tokiko describes, like beating your head against every wall over and over and trying
Yep.
to break the game, right? And I just think that seems to be a thing that the game is saying is good to do, possibly, but also like sort of ultimately unfulfilling. Like that's what the Divergence ending seems to suggest to me. You can eventually break out, but so what, right? Like you basically, I don't know. Yeah, you basically have wasted your time. I'm not sure. I don't know if there's some great, secret hidden somewhere deeper in the game, but I don't personally uh see a lot of value in like trying to unlock all the unlockable stuff and spend a lot of time talking to Tama or Aiba about psychological problems or anything like that. It
Or or
just seems odd. It seems like a weird thing to put in your game.
or the Tamagotchi.
The Tamagotchi thing, yeah, like what's the deal with that? It's so dumb.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I wish I had my like Pokemon or my Pikachu Tamagotchi still. Ay,
Oh man, that must be worth so much money now.
Dude, you'd be surprised. Actually, you know what? I have not looked up how expensive Pokemon cards are, but they weren't like as valuable as I was hoping they would be when I bought them 20 years ago.
Dang.
But yeah, so I think the mock shot. I don't know if maybe that's like a dig at the first game where you just had to
Mhm.
try everything until you broke through in those Somniums, because they
Right.
made no sense at all.
They're
And yeah,
goofy.
and a lot of them just yeah, you literally just had to try everything and then like figure out the best route to
Yeah.
not waste any of your time or Somnium
Mm.
points. But yeah, mm, I still think like there's some things like you mentioned it before, the whole like invisibility cloaks.
Ah.
Like
Yeah.
like what was I don't understand the point of those. Like they were never utilized other than like you were fighting someone.
Yeah. Um. No. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
They they seem. I mean, they seem pretty ineffective even when you are fighting people.
fair enough.
It's just silly.
So like yeah, no, I guess there's still a lot that I think that could be explored. I still want to know why Andy's head was so weird and why he had like the mole directly on his forehead.
Oh my gosh.
And
I
then,
I guess there's a lot of uh well, it may be that might be a thing that's connected with like the story of the laughing goddess, right? That there's something to do with that kind of mythological background there. I
hmm,
I don't really know. Or it could be just a joke about, Minecraft.
well, yeah, I think that's what it is. But I mean, and I guess like that would be appealing to kids or I guess young adults now.
Mhm.
It, but I was like I was trying to find an answer for it, and on the Wikipedia, it basically just says that his design was, I guess, one of the themes is that like not everything is as they appear, right?
Mm,
So then I started thinking kind of about like the other characters, right? And it's like Gen, he looks like super buff and all this, but then when you do the scan, his bones are all screwed up, right?
mhm,
So even though he looks like this big strong guy, he's actually his skeletal frame is just like a mess. Um,
right.
and there's other ones I can't think of off the top of my head, but um, yeah. So I started kind of like thinking about that, and I guess that would be kind of the overall theme of this game is that things aren't what they appear to be.
Mm,
I don't know.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
even
I mean, goes to the simulation thing again.
yeah, well, and even like the murders of the half-bodied cases, right?
Uh-huh.
Like they seem supernatural, but they 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 aren't.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um, that's that's a good point. I think the theme it seems to depend a little bit on which timeline and which group of characters you're looking at. But that idea of appearances deceiving does seem like one that kind of cuts across all of them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that that might go even for like the villains, right? Like they um, it remains an open question, I guess, whether they actually wanted to blow up the rocket and spread the virus or not. Like if they fully expected that, predicted, whatever, that your little motley crew would stop them. It seems possible.
Well, so I
Uh,
think right, it's if you go by the whole like Tokiko is the one that planned this all just so that you would play a game so that you would tear at the seams so that she could achieve moksha. Um, I mean, it is a very fantastical story, right? Like, like a giant nuke is basically being in the stadium that's going to like do this world spread this worldwide pandemic. Um, yeah, it's just like just super absurd. The plan was never for that to actually happen, right?
Right. Right. That seems right. Uh,
I think it's
I don't know.
interesting that Uchikoshi seems to always have very strong female characters.
Yeah, I mean literally strong, right?
Yeah,
Like freakishly powerful.
well, freakishly powerful, but also, and spoilers, Akane and the Zero Escape
Yes, good point.
series, where she's this architect who's been manipulating everything so that she could survive. Um, where in this it seems like it's completely different. And honestly, the Tokiko character reminds me a lot of that other character that was in, I forget the name of the game, but it was the one where you're like in the tavern and you play like the different video game genres, and it's like
Uh,
there's like a bug in there, uh,
right,
and you're
right.
kind of like battling against that, and that has like some of the same steps as well, right? Like at the end of the game, you could just say like, "Are you satisfied with the ending?" And if you were, like the game would just end. Um,
Uh-huh.
and similarly here, you get to Divergence, and you have a choice, right? And you could choose just be like, "No, I'm not going to remember this information," and the game ends.
Describing the hex. That's what that game's
Yes,
called.
that's what it is. That's what it is. Oh,
And
another.
and he came out with another game since then, actually, Inscription, which I
Oh,
haven't played, so I can't describe.
okay. Yeah. So I don't know. Part of me thinks that this whole like fourth wall breaking
Uh,
just seems to be like so in vogue now. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
the like twist du jour.
I think so. It is that. I mean, it's also, I think, any new way of telling stories, will sort of eventually get interested in like being self-conscious. Um, and then hopefully that won't be sort of where it stops, right? Like it'll have that as one of the tools in its repertoire, but it won't be like the only thing to keep you interested. So yeah, I think I agree. That hopefully this is not a like, silver bullet for all video game narrative,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
this is not the end point of all of it.
this is
But
so deep.
I
We
don't know.
did this so that the player would like do something and like do our bidding.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, okay, great, another one of these. Like obviously, I'm doing your bidding. Like it's not clever anymore.
Uh-huh. Uh,
Uh, although I still
What's up?
think I was going to say like I think this was actually executed well,
Yeah.
or maybe about as well as you can execute that kind of narrative. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like ugh, the player being a character is just so bleh, blase.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Oh yeah, it's up there with Amnesia, right? For ways to give your game some mileage. Yeah, I think
Which
it's a good critique to level, and I guess we'll see if Uchikoshi can come up with something new for next time. I hope that he does.
yeah.
See.
So well, I think that's about it. I don't really have any more thoughts. Do you have anything? Any closing
No,
thoughts?
just it's a world that is fun to visit. Um, but I am not going to probably, uh, stay meditating on it too much longer. It'll just kind of fade away, and maybe I'll revisit it at some point. But um, yeah, I recommend it to anybody who likes, solving puzzles and exploring kind of interesting, weird characters. I think it's not the kind of game that most people probably think of when they think of video games. So it's kind of a cool experimental thing. Um, but absolutely, yeah, can go down the rabbit hole with this whole genre. Um, so check it out. Yeah, that's what I'd recommend it.
All right, so this is not a repeat of the World's End Club. This is getting a recommendation from Wes and myself.
Hmm.
Yeah,
We bounce back from that one.
if God, that was bad. But although I will say, after playing the first Danganronpa, like it makes like more sense. I think the characters in that game, because they have a lot
Okay.
more in common with the Danganronpa series than they did with like Zero Escape and that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
But
That's
so
a cool story.
yeah, so yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the game. I got to a point where it's like I played like 7 hours in one day just to like finish it. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I laughed out loud a couple times. I just remember just like having a giant smile when, especially at like
Yeah.
the climax, where it's just so over the top, um,
Right.
taking care of everything. Um, I I really enjoy these types of like interactive stories, right? With
Hmm.
a very very heavy emphasis on story. I don't think you can do it in a medium other than video games, right? Like I
Hmm.
think there was a Netflix movie or something that came out where like you could choose your path, uh,
Right.
and so that was like similar. But I don't think. Well, I never actually watched it. Um, but B, it just didn't even sound like palatable. I'm like, I'd rather just play like another visual novel instead.
Yeah, I think that was called Bandersnatch.
Sounds right.
Could be wrong.
That sounds right.
But yeah, I never watched it either. And so there was a time I think when video games were experimenting with this kind of thing, like more of a film style approach and maybe certain amounts of interactivity. And then that kind of went away, right? You went to your like basic genres. Um, but this does still definitely exist. And it seems like it is more popular maybe in Japan than here, but that's the same way that RPGs kind of started too, and then they became like a pretty central thing. So I'm curious to see if that happens here, where games like Danganronpa, right, these games kind of take hold in the culture in a way. Uh, we shall see.
I think it's going to be difficult until they actually use non. You'd have to have a non-Japanese like team created. I
Mm,
think.
possibly.
I think people are turned off by a lot of the Japanese kind of like hallmarks, right? You have like
Mm,
the women with just like insane proportions, right?
right.
Just like all that fan service, a lot of crude humor, which I,
Mm.
I I enjoyed, but I know, and this isn't slander. I know Ben doesn't enjoy it very much.
I was gonna say yes. If he were here, he would be like, "Oh, this is no, this is crude. This is trash."
Yeah,
Um,
and like I
which,
know,
by the way, he's been playing some other weird new game. Um, Gosh, I can't remember what it's called now. But it's in this series of games from Project Moon, and it's a free to play game.
hmm,
So interesting to check. It's called Limbus Company. That's what it's called. Limbus Company.
interesting.
Yes.
But going back to my point, like I was playing the game and my fiance is like, in bed next to me watching, and she's just like, just like what in the hell are you playing? Like, what the, like, I was like, listen, I know how this looks. It's not as creepy as it. You came in at like a bad time, right? I felt like it's when you're a kid and your parents walk in on like the one sex scene
Yeah.
in a
Right.
movie, and it's just like, what the hell is going on here? And it's like, well, mom, you rented Jerry Springer Too Hot for TV for me, so I'm going to take advantage of it.
Just to
Uh,
throw out a random example.
yeah,
Yes.
random example.
Just like
Okay.
how do you? But yeah, I guess how do you then explain? I think you might be right. Like it's difficult to get more of a mainstream audience if they're not already interested in things that the game does, right? Like, so I guess I'm curious, like, how did you first stumble upon 999 in the first place?
S-
Um, yeah, where did you first get hooked on these?
So I believe I was shopping for video games with my friend Andrew, and we were at a GameStop or whatever, one of the video game stores, and like he saw like the loose cart, and he's like, "Oh, I heard this is a really good game," and
Mm.
so I'm trying to think. It might have been anyway. He mentioned it, and I ended up like buying it and playing it. And before we started this conversation, like before this episode, we were talking about how I couldn't even get past the first room for like
Right, you're
45
stuck.
minutes because I could not
Uh,
figure out like where to click, or I thought that I had clicked everything, but I didn't. Um,
mhm.
so yeah, I mean that's I was very close. If I didn't stick with it, I almost like just like gave up on the game before it even got started. And I don't know if I played Ghost Trick first.
Oh, right.
That
That was
was
a great game.
Yeah, that was another visual novel that came recommended from Matthew Matosis,
Ah, okay.
and so and I respected his opinion on games, and he does a great job of selling it. So that might have been the first visual novel that I played, and then it just 999, and then after that I just kind of got hooked on the Uchikoshi games.
Nice.
What about you? I think.
Well, you told me to play them. Yeah, you told me to play Ghost Trick first,
uh
and then go to 999, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah,
Um,
which is
but
yeah, I think it is a shame. Although there's like that game that I bought on the on my Switch. It was like Kentucky something something weird
Kentucky
number.
Route Zero.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that's probably an American made visual novel.
I think so. I think it would fall in that category. I don't know that it has as much of the puzzle solving aspect. I think it's more kind of just point and click adventure type of deal.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, that one gets talked about a lot in terms of like its artistry. It's very kind of um, aesthetically unique. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that there's really it just seems a little bit too isolated to maybe there are games that were influenced by it and that have come out since, but I'm not really plugged into that scene.
Yeah, and I think also I think reading in general is just down.
Mhm.
You would know at least with respect to kids that are still in school. That is there like a Harry Potter book out right now that like every kid is reading or series?
Mm, I don't think so. It seems to me that actually as much as anything it's like um people who grew up reading Harry Potter who are now still readers, who like go out and join book groups and stuff like that. People a little bit older seem to be driving market right now. I could be
Yeah.
wrong. I'm not really sure, but not that I know of. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and I also just think there is a huge barrier to entry with these visual novels, because I
true.
think they do take a you have to know about it, but then b you have to be willing to like stick with it for a couple of hours, um, before they start getting really good. So it's daunting. Like I put off playing this game because it was like, oh, do I really want to start like a 30-hour game?
Right.
Um, and it's just yeah, you know what that commitment is, right? It's like
Yeah.
my my fiance and I were like, oh, should we get a dog? Uh, but then you start
Uh,
thinking about like all the bad stuff. It's like, man, I don't have time for a dog. Like it's the same thing where it's like, yeah, I know I'd enjoy this, but like I just can't deal with that right now. Um,
oh, but a dog is so much fun.
if I
Gotta get it.
Well, I don't have a yard.
Well.
I don't even know where the closest like oh no, there's a ton of people that own dogs in my building. I guess they just go across the street. Anyway, but yeah, it's a commitment, right? To play
Yeah.
these games. It's at least like 25 hours. Um, at least for the ones that we've been playing. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I doubt that these are ever going to catch on in America. Like they're always going to
Probably
be
true.
niche, but hopefully there's enough of a niche that they continue to put out these games.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. Um, I guess I would like the world in which, more people read books and more people have dogs and stuff, but maybe that is unreasonable, alas.
Yeah, I
Well,
feel personally attacked. I don't read or have a dog.
uh, oh, but you're tempted. Like you get hooked by these games once you start playing them, and now you're thinking about, oh, maybe I could get a dog. I could take it across the street. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I don't
there's
like to.
hope.
I don't want to commit to not committing.
Ah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I think that'll wrap up our discussion on this game. I
Mhm.
promise I'll get these up to YouTube shortly.
Well, that way we can set people free. We
Egg.
can, you know, find the seams between the warp and the weft, and can create an elaborate ARG experience for people to go and discover some sort of hidden thing.
The warp in the weft is so weird. It
Uh,
reminds me of when like Patrick Star. He's like, you said, oh, I thought you said Weast. Um, but yeah, all right. Well, I guess that's it for this, and we'll have to figure out another game so that we can play and discuss.
that's what I'm saying. We should check out this free game
Okay.
that Ben's been playing. If we like it, we can finally break the streak.
All right. Fair
Get Ben
enough.
back in here.
What's the name of the game?
Limbus Company,
All right.
Limbus something. Dang it, Limbus Corporation,
Hold on.
Limbus Company.
Let me see. Oh, you already looked it up.
Yeah, Limbus Company.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna post it in our there. I don't know if I spelled that right, but um, all right. Well, thanks for playing along with me and having these discussions. I really enjoyed them.
My pleasure.
All right. Until next time. Bye.
See ya.